So I did a poll semi-recently because I was very curious after having a conversation in my Discord about people's main game mode in the finals. I know that there's some casual and regular players who prefer Power Shift because it's just easy to hop into and you can just kill people and not stress too much, whereas the tournament mode can be kind of stressful and a little bit hard to understand. So I was kind of curious how many people are actually playing the tournament mode and quick cash and stuff. I also saw people in the finals Discord mentioning this poll that I made, and then people were debating over it. I'm glad to see that there's being a discussion made about the game modes in the game, and I found it very interesting how low terminal attack was, a whopping 6%. I also found it interesting that Bank It and Power Shift was also on the very low end. Cash Out Tournament World Tour won with 60%, followed closely by Quick Cash, the two together totaling 82% of the votes. Now I want to make this clear that I am primarily a competitive player since the closed betas, and therefore a lot of my content often revolves around tournament mode, so my channel and therefore my audience will definitely be skewed towards these. The surprise to me really was that since I am a competitive player, I was assuming that terminal attack would be a more popular choice in this poll because it is the ranked mode, and that is kind of what I revolve around, is the ranked mode. Now, if you've been watching my Twitch, by the way, I have been streaming on Twitch a little bit more regularly, so feel free to check that out and say hi. You might have been watching my terminal attack grind there, and I've been seeing a lot of strange things after sinking so much time into the game, and I'm basically just trying to reach diamonds so that I can hopefully secure my top 500 spot for that ruby skin. I've experienced a lot of this game mode, and it's reached a point where terminal attack ranked as a whole experience is getting really obscure, and I feel like this needs to be discussed somewhere. There's a lot of obvious issues that I want to address too, but there's a lot that people basically just don't know about because they aren't playing the mode or they just haven't played enough of it. There's also a lot you might not have noticed even though you have experienced it because it's kind of hard to fully understand. Before we get into this, I do want to state on the record, I have had fun playing this mode. I personally prefer tournament mode, and this is not meant to be an insult to the game mode or the devs. I have found the experience of all this to be just kind of confusing, interesting, and of course a little bit frustrating, but it's still fascinating enough for a video topic. Let's start with the obvious, and that is the ELO or the RS system. The standard way a team versus team ELO system works in most games is that it takes your rank, your team's rank, and the enemy rank in order to calculate an ELO gain or loss depending on that rank disparity. And then there is often the factor of win versus loss streaks, and the more you lose in a row or the more you win in a row, the more skewed the ELO is to giving you more ELO or making you lose more ELO. People who have studied the system in the finals have not really seen the same pattern here, and for win streaks and loss streaks it doesn't really seem to matter, nor have we seen a consistent pattern for the way that the ELO is gained based on your rank disparity. There does seem to be a trend of the rank disparity mattering, but it's just really inconsistent and unpredictable. We've seen ELO gains on losses. We've also seen ELO losses on wins, and it seems around the gold plat rank, we start seeing a pattern of ELO gain rarely going over 500, but you can easily lose up to 1600. Now you might be thinking, well, these 1000+ losses surely must be versus a team that has lower MMR, but that just simply isn't the case. I've lost 1300 myself, losing 5 to 7 to a team with a higher ELO than my team, and I was one of the lower ranks in the lobby, meaning that my personal rank did not seem to matter much here. I was also on a win streak before this, so streaking did not seem to matter. Now, for some direct comparisons here, I tried to find endgames with very similar team disparities, just so that we can have a bit of a comparison. So the rank disparity in this photo is -17 for my team, and the game ended at a 5-7. We lost 1300 RS. Here is one where the disparity is -21k for my team. The game ended at a very close 6-7. We lost 707 RS, meaning we can sort of guesstimate that a close loss, while at around a 20k disparity, where we are the weaker team, will lose about 700 to 1300. Now, with a proper ELO system, if you are losing while at a disadvantage, you theoretically lose less than the average. So in our sample loss, that is about 700 to 1300. So in theory, if we're going to win a game while we have the 17k to 21k advantage, and we get a close win, we should gain about 700 to 1300 RS, because that would be the lower than average number, which is reversed from our loss sample, since now we're at an advantage and the number should be less than the average. But you can see here, a 7-1 win while at a 21k advantage gave us 493, which is not within the 700 to 1300 estimate. And here we even have a game where we went 7-2 versus a team that was only 1k under our RS score, and we only gained 502. The math clearly doesn't add up here, so obviously the team's rank total does not seem to matter enough, or there's other factors involved that aren't displayed or explained, which leads to frustration. There does seem to be a pattern of your team's total versus the enemy team's total mattering in terms of elo gain or lost, but it does seem extremely inconsistent, and very often you're going to lose more than you gain on average. There's been a discussion about solo or duo queue versus a full 5-stack. I've also tested this myself and saw a 0 difference in RS gain on a loss as a solo queue player, yet you still are likely to face a full 5-stack. So as far as I've experienced, and from talking to other people with a lot of time in terminal attack, it seems this does not have any effect on elo gain or loss. Now, this is all anecdotal evidence, so do not take this as a fact, but this seems to be the experience from everyone else that I know who has put a lot of time in a terminal ranked. The main frustration I want to point out here is the lack of understanding. There is more than likely a reason as to why the elo gain and loss seems to be so heavily skewed towards losing elo rather than gaining elo, but there doesn't seem to be a pattern to follow for us to know in this game we might lose or gain said amount. We initially thought personal performance mattered, but when testing this, it seems like the amount that your personal performance affects the RS is so minimal that it's almost hard to tell. It seems to be more about what your individual rank is, but even then, the difference between how much we gain or loss seems pretty small. I've heard tons of people that were in gold while they're on a loss with somebody in a diamond were losing about the exact same amount. So I really don't know what this means in terms of how much we're gaining or losing. The system just seems very confusing and quite flawed. Another flaw with the system is the unranked player. So if you're unranked, the RS system typically reads them as a low number, which means the system is extremely skewed against you. This gets abused very often when paired with cheaters. They'll have one person who's getting boosted, often in like diamond, and then you'll have 1 to 2 other cheaters that are unranked, making their team's RS extremely low to gain favor in the win after the unranked cheater stomps a lobby. The player who is associated with the cheater rarely gets banned, and we've seen multiple times where when they do get banned, they get unbanned shortly after and repeat the same cycle of queuing with unranked cheaters. I've also had some people come to my chat to tell me how much they lost or gained, or in my DMs after a game if they're friends with me. Since it is a small community, I do happen to face them quite a bit. There seems to be a heavy skew towards losing elo once you reach Plat Plus, where in some cases we gain about 400 RS on average as a team, and the enemy loses about 700 to 1000 on average when losing, meaning the overall elo shift from that match was a negative. So in theory, if we faced each other all night where one team wins and then the next team wins back and forth, everyone would end up losing elo by the end of the night, which in my opinion is just a clear flaw in the system. The next is cheaters. Cheaters have gotten so bad in high elo ranked that it is very common for some people to keep lists of all the known cheaters. My stack actually has a list in their Discord, and at first when I saw it, I was thinking, certainly it can't be that bad. This must be from like a previous season, or maybe this is just an assumption of who might be cheating. But as reports kind of go through and time goes on, the names on this list keep getting banned, and their records from leaderboards get wiped, and the list keeps growing, and the list of players banned in our reports just keeps going up as well. It is so bad that every day I log in, I get a notification about a player I reported getting banned. I also submit video proof to the devs when I can, but the situation just keeps getting worse. As a counter to dealing with cheaters, we have entered a phase of smurfing. Players in a stack can use an alt account to dodge a game whenever they get into a lobby with a cheater. So with the list of cheaters, we can now see early on if any enemies are cheating and then dodge the game. Now on top of this, cheaters have been adapting to this strategy. cheaters will actually now leave the game right as it starts, then rejoin during that 1-minute timer to make the enemies think the game is going to restart. This lets cheaters hide their name and avoid any dodgers. Of course, this now creates a world where both teams dodge because this tactic is known. I'm sure this is getting pretty complex, and believe me, it is. Players are now breaking the terms of service just to avoid playing with other players who are hacking. This method is now being abused by players who avoid playing games that they think they just might lose, which means when I play with other players who are in Diamond, it's very likely that enemies just dodge us because they don't want to play us. This creates an environment where you can just claim an enemy cheats so you can dodge the game. I feel like I've become extremely paranoid of who is and isn't a cheater. Common things cheaters do now is adding enemies who end up dodging games so that they can watch them in the friends list to avoid getting in their game, knowing that everyone will end up in an infinite dodge loop. The player base is so small in high elo terminal attack that it very often leads to very long queues. Waiting 10 minutes plus is pretty normal depending on the region and time of day, which leads to another issue, which is extremely unbalanced teams. As a 5-stack with diamonds and high plat players, all of us being top 500, trying to find other top 500 players in our region at the time we play is very often impossible. A lot of diamond players you see now have quit the mode or quit the game because most people who reach diamond just kind of park their account there in hopes to get ruby by the end of the season. So the system has to reach lower and put gold, silvers, and in rare cases bronze versus a 5-stack of top 500 players. This is extremely unfair for everyone involved. The elo gain can be so low that it's not even worth the time to play, and it very often is just such a stomp that the lower elo players don't get a fair chance at all. This all comes from the player base in terminal attack being so low, which definitely matches with the poll that I made. Now let's discuss the meta. Oh boy, this is a bit of a doozy because at first it was 5 lights with Cloak and LH1. That was definitely the way to play, but since the nerfs and changes along with new strategies being developed, we've seen some pretty interesting shifts in the meta. Snipers, especially on Kyoto and Skyway Stadium, is an absolute insane pick. It pretty commonly is going to be like 1 or 2 of them on your team. Even if you don't get kills, the pressure that you apply, even just from the glint, is enough to control how enemies have to play. The Cloak XP 54 is also just absurd. Being able to get in, get damage, and get out over and over is very strong. It is how I play the game personally, as it's definitely a meta pick. Then to get to the medium class, on defense you can spam 3 mines, set up a turret, or use DMAT to play from weird angles. Then on offense, we do what's called a rollout, where the medium off the rip will place the zipline and then a jump pad to get the team to the objective a lot faster. Or we can get a gateway from the Cloak light player in order to pass a lot of the angles that a sniper might be watching. Heavy has actually been seeing more and more play. The mesh is very, very strong still, especially when paired with some form of DPS to shoot behind the mesh, or you bring the winch claw and move the decryption station around. The KS-23 seems really good because it does 100 damage, which is how much everyone can regen to. So if you survive long enough with your KS, by the end of that round, most enemies are actually just going to be one-shot. I'd say the meta is certainly more complex and more interesting than it was when the mode first launched. The one aspect of the meta that seems to be ruining further complexity at the moment is the sniper. Snipers seem to have a massive amount of control over how the game is played and often dictate what strats the enemies can or can't do. Now when it comes to the game mode itself, honestly, it isn't the worst, but it simply is not made for the finals. There's a reason it needs to ban heal beam and defib, as they would be broken in this game mode. It's unfortunate to see how negative the feedback has been towards the game as a whole because of this game mode being ranked. I was very hopeful for this season because Embark has honestly done a lot of good for the game, but Terminal Attack seems to be a massive upset for the player base. I'm really hoping that with time and polish, the finals will thrive because it is my favorite shooter, and I am very passionate about this game. I think Terminal Attack needed a lot of time as an unranked mode to figure out the balancing their elo system and how to make the game flow a lot better. There's certainly potential with the mode, but in its current state, it just seems the player base is overwhelmingly uninterested in the game mode. I personally feel like their decision to take Cash out of ranked so they can work on it feels a bit off, because if anything, Terminal Attack was the game mode that needed time to work on before it could be a ranked mode. I've been interested in making a strategy video for this game mode, but Because of all the weird situations revolving around cheaters, smurfs, dodging, and the extremely low, high elo player base, I am struggling to make any useful videos on the topic because a lot of strategies just come from knowing who the enemies are. It's such a small community that we just start to learn who's the sniper, who's the heavy, what strategies that they use, and then you just counter that. It's a weird environment, and I think after I've reached a safer spot in Diamond, I'm gonna just stop playing the game mode and go back to World Tour. I feel like there may be potential, and I may revisit it if Embark is able to ban all the cheaters that plague it, and if they can polish up the game mode, elo system, and the balancing, because honestly, in its current state, it's simply not ready for ranked, and it is not competitive enough to be worth the time invested into the game mode. For most other grinders I know, we're just kind of there for the Ruby AK and then we're done. If you guys aren't already, please consider subscribing. I make guides, discussion pieces, and lately been exploring video essays on FPS topics. It means a lot and it's free to do. Thank you to all my members. Comment below what your thoughts are on terminal attack. I've heard more positive feedback from players kind of gold and below, but there's been an overwhelmingly negative outlook on terminal attack from the player base, and I really would like to enjoy it, but it's just been quite challenging to see the light here, especially because of how weird high elo is right now. A lot of us are on our journey to Ruby AK. It's going to be a challenge, but after we get our prize, we're probably going to go back to World Tour. And when you're there, I'll see you in the finals.